Hello, everyone. We are back here again covering off on major issues across Asia Pacific as well as Europe, Middle East, and Africa. We are joined by Mansi today instead of Basil, and Uday is going to start off with major issues in Southeast Asia. Over to you, Uday.
Thanks, Bhargav. So I'll just zip through Southeast Asia quickly. In Indonesia, Detachment 88 or Densus 88, the country's most capable anti-terror entity, arrested 5 suspected Jemaah Islamiyah members in East Java. Now they're investigating potential links to recent JI members arrested in Lampung. Densus also recently said that JI is involved in date palm production. Other noted JI financing avenues include income from palm oil, donations, and charity boxes. Over in Lombok, 1,500 security forces will be deployed for the Asian Talent Cup and the World Superbike Championship, which are being held soon. Meanwhile, the Finance Ministry said that $300 million will be used from the state budget to finance the Jakarta-Bandung high-speed rail projects. The project has garnered quite a lot of controversy, with several questions about its necessity, its viability, the ballooning costs, financial irregularities, and Chinese involvement. Otherwise, Southeast Asia has been relatively quiet. There's been a few COVID-related developments. Brunei is to ease internal COVID restrictions from November 19th, and travelers from Singapore will face stricter COVID-19 entry restrictions to the Council of the European Union announced yesterday. There's protests in Thailand today at the Constitutional Court and the Changwatana Government House. Paul, if you could help me with the pronunciation of that. So the protests are demanding the release of activists. There's a notable case going on at the court today, and the verdict is due. So Paul is right now in Thailand. So Paul, would you comment on the processes regarding the Thai pass and any insight on the protests going on?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Uday. For those that don't know or are listening, in a few days from now, it's Wednesday, the 10th of November. I arrived at the airport today. Roughly 11:30, was a really slick, organised operation. The airport was quiet, but it was meticulously organised. We got ushered into a waiting area. All our documentations were checked. We then basically walked down into the immigration area, went through immigration. We were placed in a holding area outside after collecting our bags. Told that our specific car would come to us. It came to us. And we'd left the airport within 30 minutes of touchdown. We then had about a 20-minute trip to a hospital to get the PCR test. They had special buildings constructed in the entry car park. So that took us, including to park and do the PCR test, took less than 2 minutes. And then we were at the hotel 10 minutes later downtown in the Sealam area. Bhargav, if we didn't cover Southeast Asia daily and have, meticulous coverage of Thailand, you wouldn't know there's any unrest at all. Those two areas, Changwatana and the other area you mentioned, they're quiet. Where we are in the city, it's uncannily quiet for the central area of the Sealam downtown line. But basically, the organisation at the airport, at the hospital for the PCR tests, and at the hotel check-in, we've already been delivered a first meal. It's just world-class, incredibly organised. Obviously, Thailand's still got restrictions on opening bars and restaurants. We can't, of course, leave the hotel now until we get our positive result. But I think the key thing to note is, as we said yesterday in our members' risk briefing, Thailand isn't probably being represented well by its own media or the international media. Indeed, by the international media, it's blowing everything out of proportion, and elements of the Thai media are trying to do that. But no, fundamentally, Thailand's a really good, attractive place to come to now that it's opened up. We of course, have to do in theory, 24 hours to get a PCR test, but the nurse that is at the hotels on arrival said, look, they've been coming in typically after about 10 hours. So we'd expect to have that, midnight tonight at the latest. And we'll head back to the city of Hua Hin tomorrow once we can escape the big smokes of Bangkok. But yeah, it's looking a lot quieter here in Thailand than it's being represented in the media. Obviously, we have clients, and there are many companies that are in the vulnerable areas like Dindang intersection, Asok intersection, Ratchaprasong intersection, so that affects them. But work from home for a period of time, and I have no doubt that as we get closer to the elections, the demonstrations will be us to momentum. Thanks, Uday.
So, Paul, if I may interject there, I keep wondering how is the airport after the COVID-19? Is it as busy as it used to be pre-COVID? Because I remember having a nightmarish time when I arrived in Thailand probably a year ago.
No, Bhargav, it's really quiet. Okay, now I think we got a little bit lucky and probably were just the only flight arriving at the time. But there was no queues at immigration. We have what's called an elite visa, but so you don't have to queue up. But there was no queue for the rest of the flight as well. There were so many immigration lanes open, and no passengers per se compared to their ability to process it. So no one had to queue. Everyone walked straight up to immigration. So they're a long way from recovery. Obviously, the process to fill out the Thai pass, you had to have a PCR test, you had to have an airline booking, you had to have vaccine tests, you had to have it all in JPEG, you had to upload what was maybe a little bit of off-putting process, but significantly easier, or perhaps on par with, say, filling in the ESTA application to go into America. So it wasn't that convoluted, but it worked very quickly. It said that the Thai pass will take 7 days to get approved. Ours was approved within 48 hours, and we submitted on the Thursday public holiday, and by the Saturday night had already received the approval for the Thai pass. Same sort of deal as Singapore. You download an app, and then that app basically you use to show you're vaccinated and to check in and out of the hotel, for instance. But everything here meticulously organised, all calm. Again, the media are talking up the unrest as much as they can, but it's not at the moment. It is very exaggerated. That doesn't mean they haven't been right previously, but at the moment they're trying to talk up a storm. That storm's probably a way off, a little bit closer to the elections. I think there's a fair bit of demonstrator fatigue. Back to you.
Thanks, Paul. I think that acts as a good indicator for our business travelers. Uday, if you can pitch in with the South Asia bit as well.
Sure, Bhargav. So in South Asia, in Bangladesh, opposition parties have called for nationwide protests against fuel hikes today. Some occurred yesterday also. Over the last few weeks, we've been seeing how rising global fuel prices have motivated protests in Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. People are grappling with financial insecurity brought on by the COVID pandemic. Moving on to India, there's a red alert in place in northern Tamil Nadu, which includes Chennai, for heavy rains. It's expected to affect parts of coastal Andhra Pradesh too. Authorities are concerned about a repeat of the devastating 2015 Tamil Nadu floods, which killed 500 people in the region and displaced millions. That's pretty much it from South Asia, Bhargav. But a quick comment on Afghanistan. The National Resistance Front claimed to attack a Taliban vehicle in Panjshir province, and a National Resistance Front group also announced its presence in Kabul. So we've recently released an assessment detailing the security challenges facing the Taliban, which has a deeper analysis of these actors and the dynamics to the Taliban's governance. That's it from me, Bhargav.
Thank you. Just a quick question there. Do you see NRF gaining any international support or recognition? The way I see it, they seem to be harping up, or let's say talking up their own strength.
Yeah, I think it's that disparate groups of a few fighters here and there trying to mount a local resistance, but at the time, international recognition or support, I think, is not. People want stability in Afghanistan. If they support a group like the NRF, they're adding fuel to the fire. So that goes against the interests of Afghanistan's neighbors, Afghanistan, and the rest of the world at the point.
I guess we just have to wait and watch how things develop, especially with NRF, India specifically, because Amrullah Saleh and his followers were kind of trained and groomed by some of the top people within the Indian security establishment. Whether they'll extend the support or not is something which will be really interesting in the coming months or so. With that, if we can move on to Middle East. Mansi, can you please cover off on the major issues in Middle East and Africa?
Most certainly, Bhargav. So the Middle East region continues to remain as volatile as ever. In Iraq, the sectarian tensions have intensified, especially after the recent assassination attempt of the Prime Minister, Mustafa al-Kadhimi. Authorities have intensified crackdown on the suspects. They have arrested 3 suspected individuals with regards to the assassination attempt. And similarly, in the Nineveh province, they have also arrested 6 suspected Islamic State terrorists who have attempted to infiltrate from Syria. And in Syria as well, tensions have intensified along the Turkish border as the Turkish-backed mercenaries have intensified attacks on suspected Kurdish positions. And in Kamlishi city, which is along the Turkish border, 3 people were killed yesterday. The drone strike was suspected to be carried out by Turkish armed forces. And also in Syria, the shadow war between Iran and Israel seemed to be panning out. The Israeli Defense Forces have carried out a series of airstrikes in the Syrian territory, including near the capital Damascus. So yesterday, the Syrian air defense system intercepted and shot down missiles fired by the Israeli Air Forces towards the Homs province. So this is said to be the 4th such incident in just a week's time. Israel has been targeting positions of the Iran-backed militias, including Hezbollah, who have been deployed in Syria. And in Turkey, there have been several instances where authorities have cracked down on illegal migrant networks, where authorities have arrested some suspects who are responsible for bringing in people illegally from other countries and pushing them into Europe. And speaking of Yemen, the ongoing civil war has intensified, especially with the Saudi-led coalition forces who have intensified their attacks on the strategic province of Marib. They have killed around 110 Houthi rebels in the last 24 hours. And also, there are reports emerging that Saudi Arabian armed forces are slowly withdrawing their troops from the port city of Aden. And that's it in Middle East. In North Africa, there's another development that is in Tunisia. Protests have emerged recently in the Aghreb town in Sfax province. So the protests have emerged because government announced its plans to reopen a landfill site. And on Monday, on November the 8th, a protester is said to have died after the police fired tear gas. So the Tunisian General Labor Union has called for a general strike in response to that. They have said that all private sector businesses and public sector offices will be shut down. So that's it in North Africa. In Africa, the major development seems to be happening in Ethiopia, where the ongoing conflict between the Tigrayan rebels and the government forces is intensifying. Several Western governments, including the US, the UK, the Netherlands, have urged their citizens to avoid all kinds of non-essential travel to the country. Only essential travel is allowed, and that too it is only limited to the Addis Ababa airport. So the UN has also warned that the country remains at the risk of an imminent civil war, which could spread to other parts of the countries. And yesterday, at least 16 UN members were arrested by government authorities. However, the government has maintained that the arrests were not ethnically motivated, and there have been no comments further other than that. So that's the major development in Ethiopia. In Nigeria, armed bandits continue to carry out attacks in Zamfara state, where at least 6 people were killed in such an attack yesterday. There have also been fuel shortages reported in Abuja and Kano in Nigeria. So most of the fuel stations were closed down for the last 2 days in the 2 cities. And in the DRC, there have been some clashes along the Rwandan and the Ugandan border, where a rebel group called March 23 Movement had captured the army base in the eastern region. So that seems to have escalated, but the Congolese government says that the military has recaptured or retaken the military base from the rebels, and they've managed to push them back. So that's it from Africa today.
Thank you, Mansi. Moving over to Europe, the major issue in Europe is that the French government has issued a directive requiring all travelers to hold at least a vaccination certificate for entering the country. The vaccine certificate should prove that at least 7 days have passed since the second vaccine shot has been administered. The list of approved vaccines include Pfizer or BioNTech, AstraZeneca from Europe, Moderna from the US, Johnson & Johnson also from the US, and Covishield or AstraZeneca mainly from the UK and India. Interestingly, Covaxin is not in the list. I must make a comment here that this is the height of vaccine politics. I mean, it is quite ironic that the entire Europe would like to consume the vaccines produced by Serum Institute based in Mumbai or Pune for that matter, but they wouldn't want to recognize or approve Covaxin produced by Bharat Biotech. I do not know how to explain that, because it reeks of vaccine politics and nothing more. Paul, anything to add on those things?
Just to keep a really close eye on Ethiopia, I think it is going down that path of civil war. It's on the edge at the moment. Thanks, Bhargav.
Thanks, Paul. We'll call it a day here. Thank you very much for joining us.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.